Welcome back to the Green Lectionary Podcast, a conversation on Scripture through the lens of creation justice. My name is Derek Weston, and today we will be looking at a text for the second week of Advent. My guest is Dr. Cynthia Moe-Lobeda. Dr. Moe-Lobeda currently serves as Professor of Theological and Social Ethics at Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary in the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, where she is a member of the core doctoral faculty. She is founding director of the PLTS Center for Climate Justice and Faith. She's one of 3 North Americans appointed to a global team to advise the World Council of Churches and Lutheran World Federation on their work toward a more equitable international financial and economic architecture. She's the editor of the book series Building a Moral Economy and author of the first book in the series, which is available now. Before we begin, a short message from Creation Justice Ministries. Winter and Advent are seasons for stirring up strength. Even as the earth grows still, life below the surface is preparing for renewal. Far from dying, creation is quietly gathering strength for what's next. Advent invites us to do the same, to wait, to hope, and to stir up strength from our deepest and quietest places so that we are prepared for the light of Christ to break into the world. Creation Justice Ministries is stirring up strength through gathering and public witness, training and forming faith leaders, bringing creation justice into church life, and supporting church resilience and restoration projects. Will you stir up your strength once more with a special year-end gift? Your donations received by December 31st will be matched dollar for dollar by a generous donor, doubling your impact for creation justice. Join us in stirring up our strength for the work that lies ahead. And join us now as we look at Isaiah 11 through the lens of creation justice. Okay, welcome, Cynthia. Thank you so much for being with us on the Green Lectionary.
Derek, thank you for having me. I am really delighted to be here, and I'm so glad that you're doing these podcasts.
I'm glad that you agreed to be a part of this. You are editing a series called Building a Moral Economy. Can you explain to people a little bit about what the overall thrust of this series is that is going to happen in these books?
Well, thank you for asking that. I would say that this series was kind of born out of my own struggling with an absurd contradiction that is clutched at my soul since I was about 14. And that's the fact that people want to be good. They want to be decent. They want to leave the world a better place. And people, the people do a lot of good in our country. And at the same time that we are good people caring for others and doing meaningful helping work, also life as we know it is shaped by a predatory extractive economy that is exploiting and damaging and even killing people here at home and around the world. And we benefit from that economy that is causing so much suffering, as well as basically trashing Earth's fragile life support systems. So that contradiction, people wanting to be good, but living as a part of an economy that is hurting so many people, is a contradiction that I don't think we need to live with. And I think we tend not to see it. We tend to ignore it. But there are people in my life for many, many years who have made it so clear to me. I'll never forget being with the Jesuit priest, John Sobrino, in El Salvador, in his office, talking with a small group of people that I was leading. And Sobrino said, in El Salvador, poverty means death. And people are not poor by chance. They're poor because the systems that bring your wealth make them poor. Or I think of a strawberry picker in Guatemala who said to another group I was leading, our children go hungry because this land should grow corn and beans for them, and it grows strawberries for you. And I could tell you stories like this all day long. So the contradiction is that we seek to do good, and we live as part of that kind of an economy that benefits us. But also we're called to love neighbor as self and care for God's garden earth. So that's where the rub is. If we're called to love neighbor as self, and yet we keep on getting our food and transportation and clothing and housing and everything from an economy that is hurting so many people. What do we do? And I think that people think there's nothing we can do about that. But the fact of the matter is that's not inevitable. There are ways we can change that system, or those economic systems, the policies and norms and practices that make up our economy. So I wanted to create resources to help people see that that it is within our range as human beings to change these systems because they were constructed by human beings. And I knew that I could not create those resources on my own. So about 7 years, the idea for this series was born out of grappling with that. And I formed a wisdom council, that is an advisory council, and then looked for a publisher, and Fortress Press stepped up to the plate. But then finding the authors, and an amazing team of authors came forth to write these books. So we have one introductory volume that I wrote that was written, that came out a year ago, November last, 2024. And that volume really tries to set up the framework, and a framework of looking at systemic economic change as a healing journey, healing that broken dimension of our lives, whereby we're basically forced to damage other people through our economic lives. So healing that, healing our relationship with those people who are damaged by our economic lives, and also a freedom journey, freedom from bondage to these systems, into freedom to live as we are called to live, people who do structure life around loving neighbor as self. And that's an amazing concept in the Hebrew Bible. Loving neighbor means so much, but it includes serving the well-being of everyone whom our life touches. So that includes the well-being of people who are suffering from climate change that is caused by, disproportionately by US lifestyles. So a healing journey, a freedom journey, and a framework of seeing economic life as a spiritual practice. And it's a spiritual practice because it shapes our relationships with neighbors. Economies shape who lives and who dies, who has water and who has food, who has healthcare and who doesn't. So it is a spiritual practice because our economic lives are what we buy and the public policies we support, etc., because it impacts our relationship with our neighbors. And then it also sets up a framework of looking at 10 different fingers on the hands of systemic change. And by 10 fingers, we mean 10 different kinds of action. So many people think that there's one thing we need to do, but there are multiple that we can do so that the gifts of everyone are used. So the fingers are things like change the rules, which has to do with public policy advocacy, or move the money, which has to do with where we bank and invest and divesting from fossil fuels, etc. Or live lightly, which has to do with our lifestyle practices. Or build the new, which has to do with supporting small-scale local businesses and finance and agriculture that really have a triple bottom line of financial viability and ecological sustainability and social equity. So anyway, that's just to say we look at 10 different fingers on the hands of change. And then we look at change in 3 arenas of our life: systems and lifestyle and worldviews, or the stories that shape us. And so after that introductory volume come 5 more. And I'm thrilled to point out that, as you know, you're the author of one of them. You're the author of Building a Moral Economy, Food Justice for All. And we have one called Water for All, and one called A Home for All, and one called Climate Justice, Climate Hope, which just was released about a couple of weeks ago, and then one really looking at the religious roots of a moral economy. So these are, except for the intro volume, these are all small books, highly readable, like really reader friendly, and they're all linked to broader, bigger toolkits that are on our website. The website is called buildingamoraleconomy.org. And there people can encounter organizations and films and videos and readings and all kinds of things that are resources for engaging in systemic change. So basically, the series is trying to help people become agents of systemic economic change grounded in love your neighbor as yourself and care for God's garden earth.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I love about the series and I love about being a part of this series is that there's so much work written out there about what is the problem.
Ah,
And a lot of what this series is doing is inviting people into hopeful solutions.
ah,
And I think for the listeners of this podcast, I
yeah,
think one of the things that's really going to be important for them is to know that for the hopeful solutions to exist, one of the things you make very clear is that those hopeful solutions have to exist for us, they have to exist for our neighbor, but they also have to exist for creation. And that
yeah.
there's no hopeful solution for our economy that doesn't
Yeah.
include God's creation in it.
Derek, you nailed it. That is so, so real. That is just utterly real how, the biblical testimony is that the well-being of the earth and the care for the earth and the care for neighbor are so connected. And that's what we see in the world now. We see that, especially that, the damage to Earth's ecosystems, the climate system, and biodiversity and everything mostly has, first and foremost, has horrendous impacts on the most vulnerable people on the planet. Indigenous folks, highly impoverished folks, people of color. So yeah, the two are just utterly connected. And it really in recent years has moved me so much to realize that even before God says, love your neighbor as yourself, God says, God puts Adam, the human creature, the dust creature. Adam comes from Adamah. Adam comes from Adamah, Adamah meaning earth. God puts the dust creature into the garden in Genesis 2:15 to serve and preserve it. That's the best translation. And your listeners probably know this, but the words translated, abat and shamar, the Hebrew words translated as keep and till, are better translated as serve and preserve.
Mm.
So there we are. Here we are, like plopped into this magnificent, splendid, like scintillatingly beautiful earth, fruitful and luscious to serve and preserve it. And yes, economic life should really do just that. Um, it's fascinating that the word economy comes from oikonomos, the Greek words for oikos, the world, the household of God, and nomos, the rules or the guidelines for managing it. So to think that oikonomos, economy, should be the guidelines for how we live in the the creation, the household of God, really says, really
Mhm.
does say, number one, serve and preserve it. And then equally, love thy neighbor as thyself. So
Yeah,
your point is so well taken.
yeah. And it actually really dovetails nicely into thinking about this text from Isaiah. We are going to look at Isaiah chapter 11, verses 1 to 10. And I
Mhm.
will go ahead and read this for us.
Mm.
A shoot shall come out from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see or decide by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he shall judge for the poor and decide with equity for the oppressed of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt around his waist, and faithfulness the belt around his loins. The wolf shall live with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the lion will feed together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put its hand on the adder's den. They will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. On that day the root of Jesse shall stand as a signal to the peoples. The nations shall inquire of him, and his dwelling shall be glorious. So, where is creation in this passage?
When I read this passage, I was dumbfounded by the end of verse 9. It's what comes immediately after that widely recognized, beautiful set of verses that portray the former predators and prey living in peace together and eating together. And I want to come back to those verses, but in response to your question, I want to move first to the end of that verse 9. It just took my breath away because Isaiah declares the earth is full of the knowledge of God. The earth is full of the knowledge of God. I thought, can that be true? The Hebrew word for earth that's translated as earth, aretz, does refer to the earth, the land itself. Isaiah doesn't use that other word, cosmos, which is sometimes translated as earth, that is a less earthy word. It includes like the whole inhabitants of the earth. But the word here, the earth, really means like the land. And so it says that earth will be full of the knowledge of God. And we don't know whether that means full of God's knowledge, like the knowledge of God is God's knowledge, or full of knowing God. The earth is full of knowledge of God. I think it's both. So I want to just dwell with that. It's so foreign to the consciousness of like modern Western human beings that the earth is actually the bearer of God's infinite knowledge and knowing God. And as I was thinking about it, I remembered that biblical texts often teach us more if we put them in dialogue with other biblical texts. And I was just spun immediately to Paul's letter to the Romans. I think it's Romans 1:18, but I'm not sure. But Paul writes, and I'm going to quote, ever since the creation of the world, God has been understood and seen through the things God has made. End quote. So God has been understood and seen for billions of years before human beings emerged on earth. That suggestion, and it's clear as can be, but I hadn't really thought about it until a couple of years ago. I reread that text, and now in looking at Isaiah, I thought about it again. The implication is that the creatures and elements of the earth, even the elements that existed long before there were creatures or plants, have been knowing God and have been vessels of knowing God and teaching. So that's agency of the highest order. Like the earth, the elements of earth are doing what some people claim is the highest thing that the humans can be, to know God. The earth has been doing that ever since the creation of the world. So that is a startling claim, and both Isaiah and Paul are making it. I mean, maybe Paul learned it from Isaiah, because Paul drew upon the Hebrew scriptures. I thought about that. Did Paul learn that the earth is full of knowing God by reading that in Isaiah? Anyway, it seems to me that there are amazing implications. One is that it certainly would be wise for us to listen, to like attune our ears to learn from the earth and its creatures and elements about what they have seen and understood of God. Might we glimpse more fully just who God is if we learn from the knowledge of God within the earth, as Isaiah says, the things of creation that have been seeing and understanding God long before our young species came to walk on this earth. I think that that's coherent with the ancient faith claim that there are two books of Revelation. And the first book of Revelation is the earth, is creation, and the second book of Revelation is the Bible. But anyway, in response to your question, that line, for the earth is full of the knowledge of God, means that we can no longer see earth simply as the stage on which the great human God drama takes place. Instead, the earth is active in the drama as a teacher of God's knowledge and knower of God and knower of God's justice-making love. As I'm saying that, Derek, I am seeing, and the listeners might be interested in knowing, behind you on the screen in which I'm seeing you is about 15 tiny little plantlings that have their little roots growing in water, clear water containers, like little vials. And then they're sprouting forth. And it occurs to me, maybe consciously or unconsciously, you are aware that you can learn from them something about the mystery that we call God. So that comes to mind as I'm looking at you right now and thinking about the earth and the creatures being full of the knowledge of God.
Yeah, yeah. I do. I learned quite a few things from them. But I love that you took us there because it would have been it's so easy to go to the wolf and the lamb and the leopard and the cow and the bear, but like we overlook in creation the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying is such a beautiful thing because it depending even if we depending on how we read it,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's either saying the earth is full of the knowledge of the Lord, and therefore the knowledge of the Lord can be discovered
Mm-hmm.
in the earth,
Mm-hmm.
or that the earth is filled with knowledge of the Lord in a way that the earth is teacher. So either
Yes.
like the earth is
So,
teacher, either the world earth is teacher or the earth is library. And
yeah,
both
yeah.
of those things are true and both of those
Mm-hmm.
things are magnificent for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Think of the earth both as teacher and as library, and that um, there is this amazing thing that is happening right beneath us that uh, the earth has always known God, always
Mm-hmm.
known God's love, always known God's justice, always known God's peace.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is any unknowing of God,
Mm-hmm.
it's from us. Um, that's a humbling observation. That's a startling observation. I think for those of us who have lived in faith traditions that have been so anthropocentric,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
knowledge of God has to come from us. I think it's almost silly to say that. Um, but it's a deeply rich and it right sizes our relationship with the
Mm-hmm.
rest of creation in some ways to think of the
Mm-hmm.
earth as full of the knowledge of God.
Well, that's very real. And I'm chuckling when you said it means it's either the library, the an archive of
Mm,
God's knowledge or a teacher of it. And you could read it both ways. I went into the interlinear Bible to look at the Hebrew to figure out which it
mm,
meant, and it's not clear. So I think it can mean both. But
Great.
the other
Excellent.
thing I learned in that is that it says after the lion and the lamb lying down to eating together and everything, it says, for the earth is full of the knowledge of God.
Mm.
That means because.
Mm.
So that says to me that maybe coming to non-predatory relationships where some do no longer prey upon others, as in through economic life, is going to be because the earth is full of the knowledge of God. It says for the earth is. So maybe it means we really must learn to listen to the earth to gain the knowledge that will help us transform our these predatory economic relationships. And I could say more about that, but Derek, you made me think of a couple of other things.
Mm.
So I want to go back to what you said.
Okay, great.
I want to go back. You said, you expanded, you said the earth is full of God's love and justice as well as knowledge. And what that reminded me of is that in Psalm 33, it says just that the earth is full of God's hesed, which is steadfast love, and mishpat and tzedakah, justice and righteousness. So that even blows your mind more, that the earth is full of the knowledge of God and is full of God's love, justice, and righteousness. So, there's another thing for us to dwell with for a lifetime. How do we receive that from the earth? And I think that the whole plot gets even thicker, this business of the earth being full of the knowledge of God, because in Hebrew, knowledge does not mean just knowing about. In the Hebrew language, knowledge also means knowledge as in being in relationship with. Like in the Spanish language, we have the verb to know in English, but in Spanish, we have conocer, we have saber, which means to know about, and conocer, which means to be in relationship with, like yo lo conozco, I know you, or so there are two understandings of to know, and in Hebrew, the knowing is both of those. So that means that in biblical faith, knowledge of God has to do with being in relationship with God. And we understand that being in relationship with God has to do first with accepting and trusting God's utterly unconditional love for us, and then embodying that love in the world. And I think, to me, one of the most world shaping and shaking dimensions of biblical faith is that being in relationship with God, thereby embodying God's love in the world, doesn't pertain only to interpersonal relations. We learn from the prophets and from both Jesus and the Hebrew Bible, it also means shaping our social relations, the systems that we set up for life, that the systems we set up in the Hebrew Bible are not supposed to, we learn in the Hebrew Bible, are not supposed to be exploitative. There's raging condemnation of exploitative economic systems. So to be in relationship of knowing God means receiving God's love and living it into the world, but not only in interpersonal relations, also in our societal relations, like our economies. And that's where, in some ways, I saw this text linking so much with this challenge of systemic economic change. That if we are knowing God by embodying God's love in the world, it gives us great cause to reshape the systems that are poisoning people or extracting water from people's lands or building climate change. So knowing God has so many implications for how we are to live, but also the power within us to live that way. Because knowing God means also claiming the power of God's Spirit living within us. And that is extraordinary love power. So I guess those few words, the earth is full of the knowledge of God, tells us a lot about how we're to live, but also about where we can get power to live as we're called to live.
I love that. I love that. And there's so often in the course of doing this podcast, I'm drawing people's attention to where creation is in the scripture, and I'm
Mm,
wanting people to not use creation as a metaphor for humans.
mhm,
But in
mhm,
this text is one where, as I
mm,
look at the creation and the creation is so clearly laid out, this is the
mhm.
space where I'm like, this actually we should be using as a metaphor for humans. This should be
Huh,
looked at as the wolf being
uh-huh,
the predator that preys on the lamb.
uh-huh,
The leopard being the predator that preys on the kid, the
yeah,
lion being the predator that preys on the
yeah,
calf, the bear being the predator that preys on the cow.
yeah.
The lion again, lion gets kind of thrown under the bus here. Lion gets being the predator that preys on the ox. And the knowledge of God in the earth reversing those
Yes,
predatory tendencies
yes.
that we have within us.
Oh my goodness, you said that so beautifully. That is what the text is suggesting,
Mhm.
because it says all of those things about the calf will eat with. I got all my animals mixed up, but the lion and the calf and the lamb, they're all eating together. They're the predatorial relationships reversed. For the earth is full of the knowledge of God. By the way, I also looked at the Hebrew, and in English it says, "For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of God," but the Hebrew says "is."
Mm,
It's the present tense is. So the earth is full of the knowledge of God, and
mm,
therefore these predatorial relationships are reversed. I just think these verses give us mind-boggling clues into God's vision for economic life,
mhm,
because they're all about there no longer being predator and prey. Those who preyed upon others no longer will do so. I think they speak like a kind of lightning bolt into the
mm,
heart of our lives today, partly because, in a previous book I did, Resisting Structural Evil, it ended up bringing me invitations to speak all over the world on 6 different continents. And
mm,
what I learned about audiences in the US was I found 2 things. And one of them was that audiences in the US have a deep sense that something is wrong with our economy, that it betrays our values, that it is enabling some to become obscenely wealthy and others tremendously poor. And it is devastating Earth's climate. But the second thing in other words, it's an economy in which some are preying on others. We
mhm.
call it predatory economy or predatory capitalism. So the fact that we call it predatory is so linked to these verses. But the other thing that I heard so frequently in audiences in the US is the idea that this is just here to stay. We can't do anything
Mm,
about it. We can't really change the systems. We can just mitigate the pain. Like we
mm,
can provide food feeding programs or shelters, um, but we can't really change it. And these texts defy that sense of inevitability, because the
yeah,
Isaiah says no,
yeah.
no more shall the lion prey on the calf. No, they will feed together. We shall eat together, not some feast sumptuously while others starve. And I find that to be really, really powerful. Um, I also I also couldn't help. I come from a tradition in which we read all four of the lectionary texts, so I
Mm.
can't help but read them all together also. And I had to read also the Psalm for this Sunday because it really expands on that vision for economic life. The first three verses of the Psalm text all include the word righteousness.
Mhm.
And in Hebrew, that is tzedakah. And that word is very lamely or limply translated as righteousness. It is often misunderstood to mean just personal or interpersonal righteousness, but it's really in Hebrew a far more multivalent term. Tzedakah refers to right relationships between people, between people and God, between people and the earth, and between groups of people,
Mm.
like societal groups. So, right relationships mean that we build relationships through which all can flourish and none be the predator,
Mm.
none be the lion preying upon the calf. The word really does signify both compassion and redistribution with
Mm.
real attention to the needs of marginalized people. And it aims at defending the rights of the oppressed or the preyed upon. Um, so righteousness really speaks to the norms and practices and policies that make up economic life that enable some to prey on others.
Mm.
So I just felt that reading that psalm together with reading this text from Isaiah cracked it open even further about this
Mhm.
calling and invitation and promise
Mhm.
of a shift, of a drastic healing, of a healing journey in our economic lives. Um, and then uh, I also I also was struck in reading the New Testament text because it says, it was the Romans text. Romans 15:4 says, and I love this. It says, and that was the Romans text for this Sunday that goes with the
Mhm.
Isaiah text. Whatever was written in former days, so that would include our Psalm and our Isaiah text. Whatever was written in former days was written so that by steadfastness and the encouragement of the scriptures, we might have hope.
Mm.
End quote. So that tells me that this message from Isaiah and that one from the Psalm are written so that we might have hope.
Mm.
Now, we need hope.
Yes.
We need a lot of hope in our time, including hope that we can transform a
Mm.
predatory economy into one in which the lion and the lamb and the wolf and the calf eat together rather than eating up each other
Yeah.
and or rather than some preying upon others. So I
Yeah.
love that message of hope that we also receive.
And I love when the lectionary texts speak to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've kind of already dovetailed into our second question about the ways that um, humanity is called to interact with the
Mm-hmm.
non-human creation.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to go back up to Isaiah because I think that one of the things that comes out of this,
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about this already, but it's not just that the predation ends.
Mm-hmm.
It's that almost even going back to your talking about the knowledge, right? It's about the wolf and the lamb knowing each other. It's about
Mm-hmm.
the leopard and the kid knowing each other,
Mm-hmm.
and the calf and the
Mm-hmm.
lion knowing each other. It's about them being in
Mm-hmm.
relationship with each other,
Mm-hmm.
enough relationship that they are eating together. This isn't just about, I don't just hear in this the end of predation, and then the predators are go off, and we never see the predators again. It's that the predators and those that have been preyed upon find commonality, find community, find restoration of the relationship that was always supposed to be there. And I wonder if that's a part of what God is saying to humanity and how humanity should respond
Mhm.
in hearing again in having the knowledge and having an earth that is full of the knowledge of the Lord.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's really powerful, Derek, because I think you're smack on that relationships do transform. Being in relationship, knowing the other is an amazing ingredient in transforming systems of oppression, literally.
Mm,
I used to bring delegations of people from North America, including really opinion-making citizens, to Central America during the war years there. And we would meet with people in all sectors of society, from the richest to the poorest, from the extraordinarily brutal military to villagers who had been attacked by that military. And
mm,
what I did learn was when people came in relationship with people vastly different from themselves and on sometimes opposite ends of oppression, things changed.
mm,
Hearts were moved in very, very powerful ways. So I do think relationship is key. And I think that learning from the earth, even how to be in relationship, is very real. And we don't know how to do it. We don't know. I mean, by we, now I'll say Western people shaped by Western civilization, modern Western civilization, um, like tuning our ears to hearing from our kin, or as I have been reading in some indigenous writers, learning from the plants as though they are our elders.
mm.
So the fact that we don't know how to do it doesn't mean we can't do it. It just
Yeah.
means we have a lot of learning to do, but it's a marvelous invitation. It's a marvelous
Mhm,
invitation. And I think again about that literally ancient faith claim that there are two books of Revelation, creation and the script, the Bible.
mhm,
And I teach at a seminary. So we teach students to exegete the Bible,
mhm,
interpret the Bible. You take a couple courses in New Testament, you take a couple courses in Hebrew Bible, but we don't teach how to exegete the earth.
mm.
In other words, the first book of creation, we don't teach ourselves to interpret for the sake of living today, like we teach ourselves to interpret the Bible.
Mm,
So I'm thinking what a beautiful step for us to take and see what happens. By
mm,
now I have my students do what we call an Earth Encounter Journal,
mm,
and they spend a few minutes each day with one piece of earth. It might be a tree, or it might be, a tiny little plant, or it might be just a patch of soil, or it might be a mountain in the distance, whatever, but to sit and just sit and listen and then see what happens. Um,
mm,
and it's meant to be a kind of a little bit of a practice
mhm,
in learning from the earth. Um, so so I think if the text is telling us that that may be one of the pathways toward healing the brutality of exploitative relationships, then we best learn to listen to the earth, to look for the steadfast love and righteousness and justice of God within the earth. Um, Derek, I also, when you said it's not just about stopping predatory economic relations, but really transforming so that people so that all people are able to eat together. And I've been like almost obsessed in the last few months of trying to understand the principalities and powers in the New Testament texts, what the words that are translated as principalities and powers. And I've been going back to the work of Walter Wink, his amazing trilogy on the powers. And Walter Wink, who's an extraordinary biblical scholar studying the principalities and powers, is convinced that, grounded in his biblical reading, that the powers that include the powers that render human evil on earth, that render domination and exploitation, will not just be crushed, they will be transformed. That they are part of God's creation, therefore good, but alienated and distorted and led astray, and will be transformed. So I've been wondering about that. Is Wink correct? I've been studying I think he is from a biblical basis, and you just said it. It's just what you said also, that it's not that it's a matter of transforming the powers that be, including systemic evils, to build a world in which, in the World Council of Churches terms, they call it economies for life. So we might call it equitable, ecological economies. They say economies for life or life-giving economies. And I think that's a really, really good term. Yeah. But I think you're right. It's the text is that they will eat together, not that the pressure will be destroyed.
And wow, I'm now thinking about that in light of what you're saying about Wink, and I'm reading this again, the wolf isn't transformed. The leopard's not transformed into a kid. The lion's not transformed into a calf. The wolf stays the same, right? Like the wolf maintains its wolfness, but ceases to prey on the lamb. There is something there about wow, I'm gonna have to sit with that for a little bit. But there is something there about not transforming, about transforming the nature of the systems, about transforming the way in which systems hurt and abuse and oppress and exploit and extract, but maybe not getting rid of the systems.
Well,
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
No, I think what you're saying is very, very powerful. The wolf does stay the wolf, but so what's transformed is the relationships. And, if we want to translate into economic players, what's transformed is the relationship of extraction and exploitation.
Yeah.
But a finance or an energy company might still be an energy company, but instead of extracting fossil fuels, they would be creating renewable energies.
Yeah.
So they would still, and since the lion and the lamb and the wolf and the calf are all going to eat together, when energy companies transform to doing renewables, they will do them in a way that does not exploit and extract from others. Or create sacrifice zones. And so what you're saying is really important, because we could shift to renewable energies, and we are, in ways that are devastating for the people whose lands get mined to produce the minerals. Lands and waters get mined to produce the minerals that we use in solar and electric vehicles. So for the wolf to be eating with the lamb and the lion and the calf, we will not be preying upon the lands of indigenous and economically poor people for their minerals. which means we will not only be transforming to renewables, but we will be consuming far less energy. So, and I think that is a very important economic reality that we call a just transition, not just a transition. So instead of just transitioning to renewables, we go with a just transition. So we don't mine mountains of minerals from other people's lands.
Yeah.
So Derek, that all comes to me from what you said about the wolf will still stay the wolf. The energy company might stay the finance institution. We still need finance institutions, but instead of predatory finance, it would be life-giving finance. So reinvesting in communities and reinvesting in ways that support equity in communities.
Yeah. And what is demanded of us is the imagination to imagine. I mean, because that's what this is. That's what Isaiah is giving us here is to be to in his context imagine the wolf laying with the lamb is a pretty big stretch of imagination. For us to imagine these institutions not being extractive and not be predatory is a pretty big stretch of imagination. And that's what the prophetic vision does for us.
Well, I think you're smack on with that. And that imagination is full of potential. And it is really a part of, to go back to the book project, the Building a Moral Economy book project, one of the key criteria for the authors, or one of the guideposts, has been stories. And that includes stories of folks who have imagined the healed economy in many ways and are living it out and implementing it. And that's also why we have this website with its toolkits, because we really want people to meet people all over the globe that already are imagining non-predatory economic ways. Everything from new kinds of finance institutions and small-scale agriculture to big policy proposals, for nations and cities. So it is real that all over the world, people are imagining non-predatory economies. And it just doesn't come into the public mainstream news. So we don't know it's there. So that's part of what we're actually trying to do in the book series, is expose people to those who are imagining, because that sort of feeds your own imagination. You find out that there are whole cities that are committed to donut economics. And that makes you think, maybe my city could be committed to that. So, so imagination plays a role. And I think the things that are already imagined are food for us. And so that is part of what the book series is trying to do, make that exposure and connection.
So we're just about out of time. Very quickly, where do you see a call to action as you read this passage? Where do you see a call to action for the church?
I see a call to action by saying, there are many calls to action. One is, let's learn in Sunday school and confirmation and everything else, let's learn to listen to the earth. And secondly, let us jump in with joy into the healing journey of building non-predatory economies, building economies for life. And let's look at these 10 fingers on the hands of change and see which ones our congregation or our synod or diocese or our denomination can really take on, to be a part of that grand river moving towards life-giving economies.
Yeah. That's a great place to stop. Cynthia, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for the book and for the book series and all of the great images of a hopeful economy that you are putting out to the world. This has been such a gift to talk with you.
It has been it's been fun, and it's been a joy for me. I want to remind everyone to go to the website of buildingamoraleconomy.org and look for the books. And Derek, thank you. Thank you for this conversation, but also thank you for doing this whole podcast series.
Thank you for joining us for the Green Lectionary Podcast. This episode was produced by Sprocket Wagner, and the music was provided by Christian McIver. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Instagram at @green_lectionary. You can support this and other programs of Creation Justice Ministries at creationjustice.org/donate.
Our story comes alive within these pages, for every time and place throughout the ages. God speaks and is heard, and the enduring word calls us to care for our world as we share the love that can set creation free. Restoring the earth to wholeness, peace, and harmony. Let the songs of the water, land, and sky resound, 'cause together we're all bound. Within these pages, there's always new life to be found.